No one wanted the giant black stallion, too wild, too dangerous, too broken. At every auction, men shook their heads, whispering about bones he had shattered and fences he had torn apart. But then came a poor cowboy, with nothing in his pockets but a stubborn kind of hope. He didn't raise a whip. He didn't carry chains. He simply gave the beast a name. And from that moment, everything began to change. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe. The morning sun had barely cleared the ridges of the Wyoming hills when the auction yard came alive with dust voices and the restless pounding of hooves. Dry wind carried the smell of hay and manure across the wooden pens. Dust swirled in the shafts of light that cut through the gaps in the old barn walls. Men shouted prices at one another, slapped the flanks of horses to test muscle, and laughed over tin cups of bitter coffee. The steady clatter of iron shoes striking planks echoed through the yard like a drumbeat that never ceased. The auction was the heart of the season, a place where ranchers came looking for sturdy workhorses to pull wagons, sleek mounts for rodeo, or young stock to break and train. Families crowded in, children tugging at mothers' skirts, cowboys leaning against fences with the sharp measuring eyes of gamblers. The atmosphere carried both excitement and tension, the thrill of the chase, the gamble of money laid down on the unknown. Yet, amid the clamor, one corner of the yard remained eerily quiet. Beyond the usual commotion, whispers traveled in low tones, as though the crowd feared to speak too loudly. Their eyes turned toward the end of the row, to a heavy iron-barred stall marked with a painted number 12. Everyone knew what was inside, and no one wanted to get too close. Inside, pen 12, stood a horse, unlike any other in the yard. He towered nearly 2 meters at the shoulder, a colossal black Shire gelding with the broad chest of a draft animal and the sinewed frame of a fighter. His hide shone a dark, metallic sheen, though it was crisscrossed with scars, white streaks like lightning frozen across the surface of midnight. His massive neck arched high, the thick mane falling in tangled ropes down one side. Each breath flared his nostrils wide, the sound harsh, like bellows drawn in anger. But it was the eyes that unsettled most who looked his way. They burned with a wildness that seemed almost human, as though some defiance inside him refused to bow. The left eye bore a faint haze from an old injury, but the right gleamed sharp and bright, fixed on the crowd. With a gaze that felt less like curiosity and more like challenge, the beast did not stand still. He hammered his steel-shod hooves into the wooden walls, sending shudders through the frame. The planks groaned under his weight. One bar already hung splintered from his last blow. He lunged against the iron gate, the chains rattling like sabers. With sudden fury, he snapped at the bar's teeth, clanging against steel so hard, the sound echoed across the auction block. A fleck of froth flew from his mouth and spattered across the straw. The crowd fell into a hush each time he struck. Even the auction yard's usual roar diminished to murmurs when the horse slammed his shoulder into the stall again, testing it as though determined to tear free. Mothers drew children away. Ranch hands who had swaggered in with cocky grins kept a careful distance, boots scraping backward in the dirt. A silence hung in the air around pen 12, like the stillness that surrounds a thundercloud. No one dares to approach. The silence was not born from ignorance. Everyone there knew his story. The Black Shire had once been purchased for timber work up in the Bighorn Mountains, prized for his sheer size and strength. He could drag half a dozen logs down a slope where 2 regular horses would have strained to budge one. But he proved unmanageable, bolting at the crack of a whip, smashing carts, dragging harnesses until they snapped. Men tried riding him, hoping his power could be turned to rodeo, but he bucked them high into the air as if they weighed nothing at all. The tales spread quickly. A foreman broke his collarbone. Another hand was kicked so hard his leg never healed straight. One trainer had been trampled ribs, crushed like kindling under a hoof. Wherever the horse went, he left wreckage behind. He broke through fences, tore open gates, led frantic chases through meadows as ranch crews scrambled to contain him. No owner held him for long. Each thought they could tame the beast, and each sold him again at a loss, relieved to see his black bulk vanish from their pastures. By the time he arrived here, his reputation had a name: the Beast of Pen 12. A curse in horseflesh, some said. Others swore there was fire from hell in his blood, a rage no man could master. And so he was penned in the farthest corner, as far from the gentle mares and geldings as the yard could manage, chained into a stall that looked more like a prison cell. When the time came to present him, auctioneer Elias Grant climbed the wooden block with a practiced showman's stride. Elias was a broad man, with a trimmed mustache, a voice that could roll across a crowd like a church bell, though now there was a slight tremor beneath his words. He wiped sweat from his brow, though the day was not yet hot. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called, clearing his throat. Up next from Pen 12, a 5-year-old Shire gelding. Near 1 metric ton of raw strength, strong shoulders, healthy lungs, prime age. A horse with the heart for timber wagons, even rodeo stock if given the right hand. He motioned toward the black figure that loomed behind the iron bars. The beast responded by slamming his hoof so violently against the gate that Elias nearly flinched. The sound rang like a cannon shot across the arena. The crowd recoiled as one. No cheer, no applause, not even a whisper of interest. "Opening at $500, Elias said, forcing brightness into his tone. He scanned the rows of men and women, his eyes seeking the smallest flicker of a raised hand. None came. Heads, lowered eyes, fixed firmly on boots. "Do I hear 300? His voice strained. Still silence. 200. His smile faltered. Nothing but the heavy breathing of the horse and the nervous shuffling of the crowd. 100 then. A fine price for a draft of this caliber, Elias announced, though the desperation leaked through now. His mustache twitched as he forced another grin. The only answer was the crash of hooves against iron, another violent strike that rattled the bolts and silenced even the birds overhead. In the crowd, whispers began to spread, thin and cutting. "That brute doesn't belong under saddle," a man muttered, shaking his head. "Only thing it's good for is the slaughterhouse," another said, his voice bitter. "I've seen mean horses," an old rancher growled, "but that one's got the devil's spark in his eyes. It won't be tamed. Not by rope, not by spur. Ride it," someone else chuckled darkly, "and the only place you'll end up is the hospital." A ripple of uneasy laughter followed, but it quickly died. No one dared keep joking with the beast so near. Men crossed their arms, women drew shawls tighter, and the distance around Pen 12 grew wider. The verdict in the faces was unanimous. This horse was a death sentence waiting to happen. Elias Grant tugged a handkerchief from his vest and mopped the sweat beading on his temples. His eyes darted back toward the pen where the horse now stood, muscles bunched like coiled spring's eyes, glaring into the crowd, as though daring someone to try. The auctioneer cleared his throat again, but the cheer had gone out of his voice. He had peddled hundreds of animals in this yard, always with the easy rhythm of a man who could talk any buyer into bidding. But today, his words fell flat. "Strong horse, fine age, excellent breeding stock," he muttered as though trying to convince himself. His words trailed off into the heavy silence. The beast struck the bars once more. A thunderous clang echoed through the yard. The crowd winced, drawing back further, and the question hung unspoken in the thick, dust-filled air. Would anyone dare break the silence? Would anyone raise a hand and claim the monster of Pen 12? At the far end of the crowd, a man leaned against the fence. His hat, once a proud Stetson, was worn pale at the edges, its crown creased by years of Wyoming wind. His shirt had been patched more times than it had been pressed. His boots carried the faded polish of miles walked instead of dollars earned. He was thin, sun-browned, a little hollow in the cheeks, but his eyes, though tired, were clear, steady. His name was Jesse Walker, and he had walked into this auction with little more than hope in his pocket. Outside, tied to a rail in the open dust, his old nag stood waiting a gray horse whose ribs showed through a dull coat, patient but frail. Jesse's only real asset was the animal's loyalty, strength it no longer had. In his wallet rested a handful of bills, 3 10s, a couple of 5s, and some change. All told, he had scarcely $50 to his name. He had drifted across Wyoming for years, taking work wherever it came, branding calves, hauling hay, breaking colts that didn't buck too high. He had eaten from too many chuck wagons and slept under too many skies to count. But through all those years, Jesse had never owned a horse he could truly call his own. Always, he was riding someone else's mount, working someone else's stock, chasing someone else's dream. Now, as he watched the commotion at Pen 12, something stirred in him. Curiosity at first, then something more. He listened as men cursed the beast, heard the whispers that it should be sent to slaughter. Still, Jesse found his eyes locked on the great black horse. The longer he stared, the more he thought he saw past the fury. Beneath the lashing hooves and the bared teeth was something he knew all too well. Loneliness. The auctioneer's voice cracked again. $100, Elias barked, his tone fraying. A prime Shire gelding, ladies and gentlemen. Look at the bone, the muscle. You'll not find such a draft horse again this season. No one answered. The horse slammed its body into the bars, the crash reverberating like thunder. Mothers clutched their children closer. Cowboy scowled at the ground, unwilling to meet the auctioneer's desperate gaze. At the back of the crowd, Jesse stood taller, the dust shifting around his boots. He had the odd sensation that the silence was daring him, daring anyone to break it. Elias sighed, shoulders sagging. He shook his head, about to mutter the words, "No sale," when a voice rose from the edge of the crowd. $50. It was clear, steady, and cut through the murmurs like a whip crack. Heads snapped toward the sound. Jesse's hand was raised, his fingers curled tight, as if bracing for the storm he knew would follow. The yard froze for a heartbeat. Then, like the sudden burst of a dam, laughter erupted. "Did he say 50?" someone bellowed. "Hell, I'll give him 50 to take that devil off the lot right now. He's lost his damn mind." Another rancher barked, nearly choking on his coffee. Men slapped their knees, doubled over. Women gasped and shook their heads. Children pointed with wide eyes. The tension that had hung so heavily moments before now turned to raucous disbelief. Elias Grant blinked, stunned. He cupped a hand to his ear as if he'd misheard. "Sir, what was that?" 50. "Jesse," repeated his voice, unwavering, "and I'll walk him out of here today." A hush fell again. The crowd wanted to laugh more, but something in Jesse's tone made them pause. The laughter gave way to sharp commentary. "He's a fool," one man muttered. "He's broke," another said. "That's why. Can't bid higher if he wanted to. That horse will kill him before sundown." The old rancher spat, arms folded. But among the snickers, a young ranch hand named Miguel leaned toward his friend and whispered, "Maybe he sees something we don't." The idea was ridiculous, but it lingered in the air, unspoken and unnerving. On the block, Elias scratched at his mustache. The man in him wanted to dismiss the bid outright, but the businessman in him remembered the months of feed wasted on Pen 12. He'd prayed someone would take the beast off his hands. Yet $50, that was a humiliation, almost as sharp as no sale at all. Elias glanced at his wife Clara, who stood stiff-backed at the edge of the platform. Her lips pressed thin, her eyes burning disapproval. She leaned close and hissed under her breath, "God help us, Elias, if you let this happen. That man will be carried out on a stretcher before he gets a mile." Elias hesitated, then sighed heavily. His voice rang across the yard, heavy with resignation. "Sold," he said at last. "Sold to Jesse Walker for $50. But let it be clear, once that beast steps out of pen 12, its life and yours are no longer my responsibility." Clara groaned, turning her face away. The gavel came down with a hollow crack. The crowd cheered not for the sale, but for the spectacle. To them, it was sport a bet already placed. All eyes followed Jesse as he moved forward. The sea of bodies parted reluctantly, men stepping aside with incredulous stares. Children tugged at sleeves to get a better look at the fool walking to his death. The black horse slammed into the bars again, nostrils flared, eyes burning with fury. The sound rang in Jesse's ears, yet he did not falter. His boots scuffed the dust steady, unhurried. When he stopped before the stall, the air felt colder, though the sun blazed overhead. The beast towered above him, muscles rippling chains, straining with every shift. The crowd held its breath. The horse roared a sound closer to a lion than anything equine, then drove its head into the iron bars with such violence that sparks seemed to leap from steel. The crowd gasped as one waiting for Jesse to recoil. But Jesse didn't move. He stood there, hat brim casting a shadow across his eyes, and met the animal's gaze head on, not with defiance, not with fear, but with the quiet gravity of a man who had seen enough of both to know neither would win here. The horse's chest heaved, his ears pinned back, his hooves striking the floor like thunder. Jesse's lips pressed together, a breath slow, steady. And in that charged silence, he looked at the monster of pen 12, not as a curse, not as a death sentence, but as a chance, maybe, his only one. And in that moment, while the crowd whispered of madness and death, Jesse Walker's eyes told a different story. To him, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The bill of sale was barely signed before Jesse found himself gripping a fraying length of rope and leading the beast through the dust. The crowd scattered as he passed, children clutched behind skirts, men stepping well aside. The black horse yanked against the line, again and again, muscles surging like waves beneath its dark hide teeth snapping at the air, as though the rope itself were an insult. Jesse's arms burned with every jolt, his boots carving grooves into the dirt. Twice the animal swung sideways, shoulders colliding with such force that Jesse nearly lost his footing. Miguel and another ranch hand rushed in from behind, trying to box the horse forward with waving arms. It only made the beast snort louder, eyes rolling white. "Easy now," Jesse muttered, though the words were more for himself than for the horse. The procession crept across the yard, until finally they reached the farthest edge of the property, the forgotten row of stalls where rain leaked through the roof and boards hung loose. No one used the place anymore. It was where Elias stored broken tools and warped planks. It was the only space offered to Jesse. The men shoved open the sagging door, and Jesse guided the horse inside. The air smelled of mildew and dust. Light cut through gaps in the roof, streaking across the cracked floorboards. Jesse knew it wasn't much of a home, but at least it was shelter. Behind him, Miguel wiped his brow and muttered, "If it kills him, at least it'll be far from the house." Jesse only sighed, tugging the rope free. He had no better choice. The second the rope slipped loose, the storm broke. With a scream that rattled the rafters, the black giant slammed a hoof into the feed trough, splintering it to kindling. The crash echoed down the line of empty stalls, sending sparrows fluttering into the rafters. Before Jesse could blink, the horse wheeled and kicked the gate. The old latch shattered wood exploding outward. He lunged into the wall next shoulders, cracking the boards until nails shrieked and popped. The racket was deafening. Horses tied outside reared and screamed, pulling against their ropes. The ground itself seemed to quake beneath the violence. Jesse didn't move. He leaned his weight on the post and watched through the flying debris. The horse's chest heaved foam, dripping from the bit of rope still dangling at his jaw. His eyes, red-rimmed and furious, rolled like storm clouds, and sweat plastered his mane against his neck. Dust swirled around him in angry halos. Hellfire, one of the ranch hands whispered. "That's no horse. That's a demon in hide." Jesse's jaw clenched. He felt the heat of shame rising in his chest. $50 might not have been much to the others, but to him it was nearly everything. And now, as he stood in the shuddering ruin of this stall, he wondered if he'd gambled it all on a curse. Still, he couldn't tear his eyes away. For every snarl of teeth, every violent lunge, he thought he glimpsed something beneath it all. A desperation, not just rage. By the time Elias returned from the auction block, 3 of his men had gathered near the paddock. None had gone closer than 20 feet. Miguel, usually the first to throw a rope on any bronc, kept his arms folded tight, jaws set. "I've ridden rodeo broncs," he said grimly, watching the beast slam his weight against another post. "But this one's different. Those horses buck because it's their job. This one," he shook his head, "this one hates us, all of us." The others nodded, lips tight with the same unspoken fear. "Walker's a dead man if he steps in there," one rancher spat. "They'll be dragging him out in pieces before sundown." Miguel said nothing, but his eyes flicked once toward Jesse, who still hadn't moved from his spot by the gate, watching like a man studying a riddle he refused to give up on. The sun had begun to lean westward when a sharp voice cut across the din. "Walker?" Jesse turned. Clara Grant strode toward him, skirts brushing dust, her expression carved of stone. She stopped just outside the wreckage of the stall, one hand planted on her hip. "You must be mad," she said flatly. "Mad or desperate? Perhaps both?" Her eyes swept over him from the faded shirt to the patched boots. "You don't even own a proper saddle, not a bridle worth its leather. What do you intend to do with 3,000 pounds of fury you can't even ride?" Behind her, the horse bellowed and struck the boards again. Clara didn't flinch. Her voice dripped with scorn. "Men richer than you have tried and failed." They walked away, bloodied, limping, humiliated. "And what you think poverty makes you braver, that rags make you stronger." The words burned, though Jesse kept his face impassive. He turned his gaze back to the stall, watching the beast slam another plank until it snapped in two. "If that monster kills you," Clara pressed, her tone rising, "it will not be my husband's fault. You'll bear that alone, and don't think the law will see it any other way." Silence followed, heavy with the weight of her contempt. Jesse's voice, when it came, was low and rough as gravel. "I didn't buy him to prove anything, Mrs. Grant." His hands hung loose at his sides. His eyes never left the horse. "I bought him because no one else would. Because he deserves one chance. That's all." Clara stared at him a long moment, lips parted as though she wanted to scoff again. But something in his tone, steady, almost resigned, stilled her. She shook her head sharply, skirts snapping as she turned. "Then, God help you, Walker," she muttered, striding away. The next morning broke pale and sharp, the Wyoming sun crawling over the ridges and spilling its light into the valley. Dew clung to the grass like glass beads. Jesse Walker rose before the others, stirred a worn sickle in hand, and stepped into the meadow, beyond the ranch house. He bent low, cutting tender shoots of green, gathering them into a rough bundle. The smell was sweet, damp, alive, the kind of grass a horse might actually choose over dry hay. By the time the ranch stirred awake, Jesse was already crossing the yard again, the bundle tucked under his arm. He made his way to the far edge where the broken stalls leaned into the wind. From inside came the familiar sound of iron striking wood, a guttural snort and the angry rhythm of hooves. Jesse set the bundle down in front of the gate. The black horse lunged instantly, ears pinned, teeth bared, slamming against the bars. Jesse did not flinch. He lowered himself onto the worn plank that served as a bench outside the stall, boots planted, hat tilted against the morning glare. "I'll just sit here," he said quietly. No ropes, no whips, no forcing. The beast snorted, pawing the earth tail lashing. But Jesse only folded his arms across his knees, as unmoving as stone. It was a strange picture, the wiry cowboy in a patched shirt, offering nothing more than a bundle of grass, and opposite him, a mountain of muscle wrapped in scars, fury trembling in every line of its body. Hours passed. Jesse did not rise. He sat with his back straight, his eyes steady on the restless giant. The horse circled, stomped, flared its nostrils, then threw its head with a clatter against the bars. Jesse merely watched, letting the noise wash over him like waves on rock. Now and then, he spoke, his voice low, almost conversational. "I don't want to own you," he said. "I don't want to break you down. I just want you to know I'm lost too. Same as you." A few ranch hands passed by carrying tack to the corral. One chuckled, nudging the other. "He's talking to it," the man said, loud enough for Jesse to hear, "like the brute's gonna sit down and answer." Another snickered. "Poor fool's lost his mind. That horse'll kill him the second he steps inside." Jesse ignored them. He did not argue, did not defend himself. The sun climbed higher, heat pressing down, sweat tracing lines along his temple. Still, he sat, lips moving now and then, with words not meant for the hands, but for the creature pacing behind the bars. The giant lunged more than once, slamming against the gate with such force that dust poured from the rafters. But each time Jesse remained unmoved, offering no shout, no whip crack. And after a while, the horse's charges grew shorter, its eyes narrowing as though trying to make sense of this man, who neither attacked nor fled. The stall quieted by degrees. Not silent, never silent, but the wildest bursts came less often. Instead, the black beast snorted, pawed, then lifted its head to watch. The eyes that had once burned like fire now studied, calculating. Jesse's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I see you watching," he said softly. "Wondering what game I'm playing? I've got no tricks, friend, just patience." The horse huffed, ears twitching. For the first time, he stood in one place longer than a heartbeat, muscles taut but still. The gate held, and the man on the bench did not move. It was no surrender, no miracle transformation, but it was something. By late morning, Jesse began to speak longer, as though telling stories to the wind. His voice was steady, even when the horse stomped or tossed its head. "I've been kicked off more ranches than I can count," he murmured. "Never had enough coin to stay put, never enough gear to call my own. Folks look at me and see a drifter, a poor man with nothing but calluses and a worn-out hat." He leaned his elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the creature before him. "I've heard the laughter. I've felt the looks. You'd understand that, wouldn't you, being passed from hand to hand until no one wants you anymore?" The horse pawed the dirt ears, flicking, but did not rear this time. "My dream was always the same," Jesse went on. "To have one horse that was mine, not leased, not borrowed. A partner I could ride with across these hills through the long nights. Just one." His voice dropped lower, almost lost beneath the rustle of the wind. Maybe you don't believe me. Maybe you never will, but I'll keep coming back. Tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. Until you understand, I won't give up on you. The stallion shifted his weight muscles rippling and gave a sharp toss of his head. But still, he did not turn his back. By midday, the air was thick with heat. Sweat clung to Jesse's shirt, his lips cracked with thirst. He finally pushed himself to his feet, brushing the dust from his trousers. The horse watched him, ears pricked forward, head lifted high. The bundle of grass still lay untouched at the gate, but it remained there untrampled, unscattered. That alone was a change. One of the hands passing by stopped short, staring. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "It ain't thrashing anymore." Jesse tipped his hat back, squinting at the stall. "Not today, at least," he said. His voice carried no triumph, only a tired steadiness. He bent lifted his old hat from the plank where it had rested and settled it on his head. Then, turning to leave, he spoke low words, meant for the horse alone. "Thank you," he said, "for not tearing the place apart today. That's a start." The stallion stood at the bars, muscles still tense, but no longer raging. He watched as Jesse walked away, steps, slow shoulders, weary. For the first time, the valley did not echo with a defiant scream. Instead, a curious silence lingered in the stall, as though the beast were considering the absence of violence. At the edge of the yard, Jesse paused and looked back. The black figure remained at the gate, head tilted, eyes following. A flicker of hope burned low in Jesse's chest, fragile but steady. "It doesn't see me as the enemy anymore," he thought. "Not completely. Someday maybe it'll understand." The wind tugged at his hat brim, carrying with it the faint smell of grass and sweat. Jesse turned toward the horizon, walking on with dust at his heels, carrying with him the smallest seed of belief that what had begun today could one day grow into something more than survival. The ranch slept under a cold Wyoming night. Wind slipped through the cottonwoods with a restless whisper, carrying with it the dry scent of dust and sage. Insects hummed in the dark, their song weaving into the silence that pressed down over the valley. Most of the ranch hands were long gone to their bunks, their snores and shifting boots muffled behind plank walls. Only the far corner of the yard still held light. A single oil lantern swung faintly from a nail outside Pen 12, spilling a dim yellow halo across the weathered wood. Its glow threw tall, jagged shadows, one of a man seated on a rough wooden chair, the other of a massive horse pacing in slow, relentless circles. Jesse Walker sat there, elbows resting on his knees, hat pulled low against the chill. His body ached from a day's labor, but his eyes never left the black giant inside the stall. The horse moved with the rhythm of a caged storm, heavy hooves striking the earth, breath rasping like wind through canyon walls. Every so often it stopped, ears flicking toward the lantern, then continued its restless circuit. Jesse didn't speak. Not yet. The night stretched out before them like an unwritten page, and he chose to wait, listening instead to the cadence of the beast's breath, the scrape of hoof against dirt, the sigh of rafters above. It was the kind of waiting he had come to know well, long hours where silence did the speaking, where patience laid the first fragile threads of trust. He had sat this way for days now, always outside the bars, always with that same steady gaze. And each night the wild fury seemed to lose a sliver of its edge. Tonight felt different. Jesse felt it in his chest, in the way the air hung heavier, charged like the pause before thunder. He shifted in his chair, leaned forward, and at last broke the silence. "I reckon you've had enough of waiting too," he said softly. The horse slowed its steps, ears flicking at the sound. Its eyes, dark as coal, glinted in the lamplight. Jesse rose slowly, brushing dust from his trousers, and walked closer until he stood just beyond the bars. For a long moment, he simply stared back, unblinking, letting the space fill with a strange, wordless recognition. What he saw in those eyes wasn't only rage. Beneath the fire was something rawer, older weariness, the kind Jesse knew himself. The kind of exhaustion that came from being tossed aside, branded dangerous, seen only as a problem rather than a soul. "You're not a monster," Jesse murmured. His voice was steady low, almost like a prayer. "You're just tired. Same as me. All you ever got was chains and curses. Maybe what you need is something else. Maybe all you need is a name." The horse stopped moving entirely. For the briefest heartbeat, silence thickened. Then the beast turned its head and resumed pacing, though slower now, the rhythm less frantic. Jesse gripped the bar with one hand. He inhaled deeply, then let the words fall clear and certain into the night. "From this day on, you're Storm," he said. The name rolled off his tongue like thunder carried across the plains. His voice did not waver. Not beast, not crazy, not curse. Just Storm. My Storm. The ranch yard seemed to still. Even the insects seemed to falter in their song. The air thickened, suspended. Inside the stall, the giant horse froze mid-stride. Its ears swiveled forward, catching the sound. The massive head tilted slightly, nostrils flaring, eyes locking onto the man who had spoken. For the first time, there was no immediate lunge, no strike against the bars. It stood, and it listened. Jesse's chest tightened. He felt something invisible stretch between them, a taut, unseen thread, delicate but real. A connection born not of force or fear, but of recognition. He allowed a small smile to touch his lips. "Storm," he whispered again. "It suits you." The silence stretched long. Jesse did not rush to fill it. He let the name hang in the space, allowed the animal to feel it, to test its weight. Storm blinked a slow shuddering of eyelids, then gave a sharp snort. The sound echoed, but it was not hostile. The ears flicked again, not pinned back in rage, but alert and listening. Jesse did not move closer. He simply remained there, grounded, breathing evenly. Minutes passed. Then the stallion did something unexpected. He exhaled a deep, rumbling gust of air, and with a sudden toss of his head, he stepped back from the gate. 1-2 strides. Then turning, he walked to the corner of the stall where rough hay had been scattered earlier. Lowering his head, he began to eat. To anyone else, it would have been nothing. A horse hungry, finally feeding. But Jesse felt his heart leap. For the first time, the black giant had chosen something other than defiance. For the first time, he had not met Jesse's presence with violence. The cowboy lowered his head, whispering almost reverently, "Thank you, Storm." That night became a turning point. Jesse remained where he was, quiet, content, simply to watch the rhythm of the horses chewing the steady rise and fall of its sides. His thoughts wandered back to his own past, to the years when people called him useless, a drifter, nothing worth holding on to. He remembered faces that looked at him the way folks now looked at this stallion, like a mistake, a burden, a lost cause. He remembered the sting of laughter, the coldness of doors shutting him out. And he remembered the 1 or 2 souls who had once looked at him differently, who had given him a chance to stand on his own name again. That was all he was doing now. Returning the gift. He glanced back at Storm, who lifted his head briefly, hay clinging to his lips. Their eyes met across the dim light. The horse's ears twitched a subtle motion, but it held Jesse's gaze longer than before. "Yeah," Jesse said quietly. "You understand, don't you? Being more than what they called you, just needing someone to see it." The stallion snorted softly, lowered his head again. Jesse smiled, weary but certain. For the first time since bringing the beast from the auction, Hope felt like something solid in his hands. The lantern sputtered as the oil thinned shadows, flickering across the walls. Jesse pulled his chair closer, settling in for the rest of the vigil. He didn't need sleep tonight. He needed only to be here to bear witness to the fragile thread that had been spun between them. The night deepened. Coyotes sang far off in the hills, their cries lifting into the stars. Storm shifted now and then, but no longer in fury. His sides rose and fell in slow rhythm. And when he finally lowered himself onto the straw, the sound of his body meeting the earth was heavy and final. Jesse leaned back, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He whispered once more, letting the name ride the wind like a promise. Storm. And in the quiet that followed, he believed for the first time that both man and beast had stepped across a threshold neither could return from. The sun climbed slowly over the ridges of Wyoming, gilding the world in soft bands of pale gold. Dew clung to the tall grass, catching the light like scattered shards of glass. The ranch stirred awake with the shuffle of boots and the calls of men heading toward the corrals. Out at the far end of the yard, where Pen 12 leaned crooked against the wind, Jesse approached with a bucket of water in one hand and an armful of hay in the other. His body ached from the night spent on a wooden chair, but his mind was restless with one thought. Would today be different? The memory of the night before still pulsed inside him, how the stallion had stilled at the sound of his name, how he had turned and, for the first time, not met Jesse with violence, but with a pause, a breath, a choice to eat instead of fight. Jesse had carried that flicker of hope with him into the dawn. He pushed the old gate with his boot and stepped into the small pen outside the stall. The boards creaked under his weight. Storm lifted his massive head at the sound, the eyes so often wild with fury fixed on Jesse with sharp awareness. But there was no immediate crash against the bars, no furious bellow. The stallion simply stood there, ears flicking, nostrils flaring. Jesse set the water down quietly, placed the hay near the rail, and met that gaze. Something in the stillness told him the name had taken root. He let a small smile touch his face. "Morning, Storm," he said softly. The giant horse blinked once, then remained still. The silence where once there had been chaos was its own kind of answer. Jesse moved closer. His boots crunched lightly on the dirt as he stepped within arm's reach of the bars. He did not stop where he usually did at the safe distance where most men kept themselves. Instead, he leaned forward and extended his hand through the rails. There was no rope, no halter, no whip. Only his hand palm open, trembling just slightly. Storm's breath came louder. The stallion lowered his head, sniffed, then swung it close. Hot air rushed across Jesse's skin, damp and strong, filling the space between them with a heavy scent of horse and hay. The great nostrils flared, brushing against Jesse's calloused fingers. For a moment, Jesse's heart slammed in his chest. Every instinct screamed to pull away. But he held still, jaw-tight eyes, steady on the animal before him. The stallion did not bite, did not strike. Instead, he huffed again, lips twitching as if testing the strange offering of trust. Jesse let out the breath he had been holding. "That's it," he whispered. "That's all I got, just me." Unseen by Jesse, someone had stopped in the yard. Miguel, the wiry ranch hand, who had once laughed the loudest about Jesse's purchase, froze mid-step when he spotted the scene. His eyes widened. "Holy Mary," he muttered. It didn't kick him. Normally, just the sight of a man approaching was enough to send the black stallion into a fury, battering the boards until nails split. Yet here was Jesse, armed through the bars, and the beast only sniffed. Miguel whistled low, then called over his shoulder. Another hand, Tommy, came jogging up. The two of them stared, their expressions tight with disbelief. "You see in this," Miguel whispered. Tommy nodded slowly, crossing his arms. "I've seen that horse near kill 2 men. What the hell's he doing different?" Miguel shook his head. Maybe he found a way we didn't. Maybe he ain't crazy after all." The two stood silently, the weight of what they saw pressing into them. Word would spread. Already whispers were forming in the dust of the morning. Something was changing in Pen 12. Jesse kept his hand near Storm's muzzle voice, steady as he spoke. "See, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not carrying a rope, not swinging a stick. Just me standing here. That's all." Storm's ears twitched back and forth. He lifted his head, suddenly pulling away a step, but did not turn his back. His eyes, sharp and questioning, stayed locked on Jesse. The cowboy didn't falter. "I know that look. I've worn it myself. Folks shoving you around, calling you worthless, telling you there's nothing left for you but the pit. I've been there. Thought maybe I'd stay there forever." His voice deepened, slow and even. "But I didn't run. And I ain't running now. Not from you." The stallion tossed his head mane, scattering in the light. But the movement lacked the rage of before. It was a motion of tension, of something caught between defiance and doubt. Jesse steadied his hand against the rail. "I ain't leaving you, Storm, no matter what." The words hung in the air like an oath. Minutes later, Jesse dropped the small bundle of hay inside the stall. For days it had been kicked aside, trampled underhoof left untouched. This morning, Storm lowered his massive head toward it. Slowly, cautiously, his teeth tugged at the strands. He chewed, lifted his head, then chewed again. Jesse's chest swelled. It wasn't much, just a few bites, but it was the first time Storm had eaten what he had brought. The stallion blew out a long breath through flaring nostrils. The sound was deep, not hostile, but steady, as if some inner weight had shifted. The usual shrill, threatening squeals were absent. Around the yard, a few more hands had gathered, pretending to busy themselves with chores, but stealing glances at the pen. Their whispers carried on the breeze. "Look at that, he's calmer. Never thought I'd see the day. Maybe the beast of Pen 12 ain't a beast no more." Jesse ignored the voices. His eyes never left Storm. "Small steps," he said softly. "That's all we need." The stallion chewed tail, swishing slowly. It wasn't surrender, but it was something closer to peace. By mid-morning, the news had spread through the ranch. Men who once avoided the far end of the yard now found excuses to pass by, curious to see if the rumors were true. Some scoffed, insisting it wouldn't last. Others watched in quiet amazement as the animal they had feared seemed, at least for the moment, changed. For Jesse, the transformation was not dramatic. It was in the little things, the pause before anger, the willingness to sniff a hand, the decision to eat instead of destroy. But he felt each one like a stone laid in the foundation of something greater. The days stretched into a quiet rhythm marked by small victories in Pen 12. Storm no longer slammed the rails at the sight of Jesse. He had begun to eat the hay Jesse brought. He stood longer in silence, ears flicking to the sound of Jesse's voice, instead of pinning back in rage. Jesse could feel the shift, subtle but undeniable. The stallion was no longer trying to destroy everything in reach. Instead, he seemed to be listening, weighing, questioning. And Jesse, who had gambled $50 and his very life on this impossible bond, decided it was time to take the next step. That morning, he walked into the yard carrying a thick lead rope. He had borrowed its knots, strong and clean. No whip, no stick. Just the rope, a handful of fresh clover, and the patience that had carried him this far. He paused at the stall, running a hand along the weathered boards, then spoke softly to Storm. "Today we walk out together. Let's show them you're not the monster they believe." Word had already spread that Jesse planned something reckless. By the time he slipped the rope over his shoulder, half the ranch had gathered at a distance. Some leaned against the corral rails, arms crossed, faces drawn tight with worry. Others whispered under their breath, unable to look away. "He's crazy," one muttered. "It'll be his funeral," said another. "Storm will tear him apart the second that door opens." Still, Jesse's expression didn't waver. He unlatched the gate and met Storm's eye. "Easy, boy. Just follow me." The iron latch gave way with a groan. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the stallion surged forward, throwing his head high, loosing a thunderous whinny that echoed across the ranch. Dust lifted from the boards as his hooves struck the ground. Several ranch hands stumbled backward. One man swore and nearly tripped over a bucket. Even Miguel took a cautious step away, but Jesse held firm. His hand gripped the rope, steady body turned slightly so his shoulders were never squared in challenge. He walked forward slowly, speaking low, steady words. To the shock of everyone watching, Storm didn't lunge or rear. His muscles rippled with tension, yes, but instead of bolting, he moved with Jesse, one powerful stride at a time. The yard fell into silence so deep that even the crows circling overhead seemed to hush. With every step the stallion took outside the stall, hearts pounded harder in the onlookers' chests. "Good Storm," Jesse whispered, his free hand brushing lightly against the thick curve of the stallion's neck. The horse flinched, but did not strike. "That's it. Just you and me." 100 eyes followed as Jesse led Storm into the open field beyond the broken fence. Each stride was like the ticking of a clock wound too tight, threatening to snap. But it never did. Storm's ears flicked, his nostrils flaring, but his massive body stayed beside Jesse's, tethered not just by the rope, but by something deeper, something that held the crowd frozen where they stood. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then a rancher with a gray beard finally whispered, That can't be the same horse." Miguel's jaw dropped. He muttered half to himself, "He's calm. He's actually calm. Like any other damn horse." Clara stood rigid near her husband's lips, pressed into a hard line. "Impossible," she breathed. "That thing tossed 3 men in one afternoon. It doesn't make sense. How could it just..." "Follow him," beside her. Elias folded his arms, eyes narrowing. He had seen too much blood and fury in that stall to accept this sight at face value. Yet the scene before him was undeniable. The stallion, the beast no man had been able to tame, was walking quietly beside a ragged cowboy no one thought would last a week. Suspicion and hope warred across Elias's weathered features. His voice came low, almost reverent. "If I wasn't looking right at it, I wouldn't believe it." Jesse halted at the center of the open field, the breeze tugging at his worn shirt. He let the rope slacken in his hand and turned slightly so the horse stood beside him. Storm's chest heaved, breath-loud ears flicking toward every sound. But he did not explode. He stood rooted to the ground, head-high, eyes trained on Jesse, as if the man were the only anchor in a sea of chaos. The crowd murmured louder now, disbelief mixing with awe. Elias muttered almost grudgingly, "There it is. Proof in front of me." But Clara shook her head. "It's nothing but luck. The storm will break soon enough. He'll show his true colors." Yet even as she said it, the bitterness in her voice rang thinner than before. In her eyes, the sharp edge of fear had dulled, replaced by something else she couldn't name. By evening, the story was everywhere at the saloon, the church steps, the market stalls. Some swore they had seen a miracle. Others said it was a trick bound to end in disaster. In the bunkhouse around supper tables under the wide Montana sky, one question churned over and over: keep the stallion or get rid of him. The arguments gained weight quickly. Storm's history was long, bloody, and impossible to ignore. Broken fences, shattered gates, men carried away with crushed bones. It was easy to list the wreckage he had left behind. Clara Grant, never one to soften her words, stood before a crowd outside the ranch office and declared with a voice sharp enough to cut wire, "This animal is a danger. Every one of you knows it." We all remember the accidents: 3 men laid up in bed, one with a leg that never healed straight again. You want to gamble lives on a few quiet minutes in the pasture? Don't be fooled. A storm doesn't change its nature. The older ranchers nodded, faces grim. They had seen horses ruin men before, though none quite like this. The town's blacksmith spat into the dirt and muttered, "She's right. That beast belongs nowhere near people." By the next morning, the debate had ignited across the valley. At the cafe in town, 2 men argued so loudly the waitress had to separate them. In church, whispers followed the pastor's sermon. Would God really want us to risk lives for a horse? By the time the sun rose over Elias Grant's spread again, the question had become unavoidable. The Grants called a meeting. Ranchers, hands, and townsfolk gathered in the wide barn, its doors thrown open to the summer air. Dust hung in golden shafts of light as men and women filled the benches. The smell of hay and leather clung to the rafters. Jesse stood near the back, hat in hand, uncertain if his voice even belonged in such a room. But when the talk turned toward slaughterhouses and insurance contracts, something in him rose up. He stepped forward, his voice carrying across the barn. "If all a creature knows is the whip and the chain, then what else can you expect but madness?" he began. His voice was low but steady. "But I've seen different in Storm. I've seen the fire cool when there's no rope biting into him. I've seen him stand quiet when I laid my hand on him. And you all saw it yourselves. He walked into that field with me, calm as any horse here." He swallowed, hard eyes scanning faces that looked back with skepticism, some with pity. "I didn't buy him for a show or to prove I was tougher than anyone. I bought him because I saw something left in him, something worth saving. And I'll say it plain, I believe Storm can be more than a nightmare chained up in Pen 12. The barn buzzed with mutters. Most of the older ranchers shook their heads. Dreamer one scoffed. "He'll learn when that thing puts him in the ground." Yet among the younger men and women, Jesse's words didn't fall flat. Some glanced at each other, thoughtful. A few even nodded, hesitant but moved. Clara rose from her seat, her presence demanding silence. Her voice cracked like a whip. "Storm is not a dream, Jesse. He's a disaster waiting to happen." She ticked the points off one by one, her tone relentless. 3 broken men, one of them crippled for life. Thousands of dollars in damage barns, fences, equipment. And now the insurance company's breathing down our necks, threatening to cut us off. You think this ranch can survive without coverage? You think Elias and I can stake everything we've built on your gamble? Her eyes bored into Jesse's. "You're poor, so maybe you can risk your neck on foolish hope. We cannot. Not for you, not for that horse." The weight of her words pressed on the room. The older ranchers echoed their agreement, voices rough with certainty. "Send it to the Packers," one barked. "Better a bullet in the head than another man in the ground." Jesse stood in silence, alone under the harsh light of judgment. Then another voice broke through. Calm, measured, but firm. Dr. Nathan Cole, the town's veterinarian, rose from his bench. His weathered hands rested easily on his belt as he spoke. "Clara's right about the damage," he said. But let's speak of facts, not fear. All eyes turned. Nathan cleared his throat. Physically, Storm is near perfect. Strong lungs, clean joints, no lameness, no chronic illness. This horse is not broken in body. What we've all seen, his violence, his rage, is not born of nature. It's trauma. He's been beaten, restrained, mishandled. Any living creature treated that way will learn only one lesson: to fight everything. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Nathan pressed on, but in recent weeks, I've observed something. He no longer attacks without reason. His responses to Jesse are different, quieter, slower. That's not chance. That's not luck. That's behavior shifting. That's the first sign of what we call reprogramming. Reprogramming? A rancher scoffed. Nathan nodded. Habits learned from abuse can be unlearned. It takes time, patience, and consistency. Storm's already showing he's capable of change. The barn stirred. For many, it was the first time they'd heard the beast's fury framed as injury instead of evil. Elias had invited another voice too. A woman in a crisp shirt and riding boots rose from the corner where she had been taking notes. Dr. Emily Carter, a specialist in equine behavior from the State University, had been called in at Elias's request. Her voice carried the calm precision of science. Storm is not beyond redemption, she said simply. Violence in animals often stems from broken trust. What Jesse has done is not accidental, it is the application of patience, repetition, and a refusal to meet violence with violence. She stepped closer to the crowd, her gaze steady. Think of it this way. Every time Storm has reacted with rage, the world has answered with more force: ropes, whips, chains. That cycle reinforced his belief that humans are pain. Jesse interrupted the cycle. He sat, he spoke, he did nothing to harm. For the first time in Storm's life, the pattern broke. Silence filled the barn. This, Emily continued, is what we call emotional reconditioning. The stallion is learning that not all human contact leads to pain. If this continues, his brain will adapt. His responses will change permanently. That is science, not sentiment. Some ranchers frowned, unconvinced. But others, especially the younger ones, leaned forward, listening. The debate split the room like a fence line. On one side, Clara and the older ranchers hammered the same warning: a single kick can kill. You can't gamble lives on theory. They spoke of wives, widowed sons, fatherless barns wrecked. Their arguments were heavy with history, each word sharpened by fear. On the other side, Jesse, Nathan, and Emily carried a different kind of weight: hope, reason, a belief that change was possible if given time. You saw him, Jesse reminded them. He walked calm. That wasn't a trick. That was trust beginning. The room pulsed with tension, every man and woman gripping their own judgment like a weapon. And at the center sat Elias Grant, silent, his hands clasped, his eyes fixed on the dust swirling in the golden light. Elias knew more than anyone what one wrong decision could cost. A mistake here could cripple his ranch, ruin families, or worse, put a man in the ground. Yet the image of the black stallion walking beside Jesse, quiet and strong, would not leave him. The barn felt like a courtroom without a judge. Arguments fired back and forth, the air thick with heat and sweat. Jesse stood alone, but unyielding. Clara's voice rang sharp, the voice of experience hardened into steel. Nathan's words offered reason. Emily's offered science. And still the ranch waited for Elias to speak, to choose between fear and possibility, between safety and hope. The storm outside had passed, leaving the valley quiet. But inside the barn, another storm raged, one not of hooves and fury, but of voices and belief each crashing against the other, waiting for the verdict that could change everything. 3 mornings later, Elias called for a meeting in the ranch house office. The sun streamed through the wide window, glinting off the brass buckle of his belt. Clara sat stiff in her chair, her lips a thin line. Miguel leaned against the wall arms, crossed, pretending to be at ease. Dr. Nathan Cole stood with his ever-present notepad, and beside him, Dr. Emily Carter adjusted her spectacles, cool and composed. Jesse arrived last dusk on his boots, his face steady but his palms damp. He had the look of a man who already knew what was coming, yet braced himself all the same. Elias cleared his throat, his voice carrying the weight of finality. Storm will not be sold. He will not be destroyed. Not yet. Clara's head snapped toward him, but before she could speak, Elias lifted a hand. This is not mercy. This is trial. Jesse, he fixed his eyes on the younger man. You will prove with actions, not words, whether that horse belongs among men again. Jesse straightened, nodding once. Conditions, Elias continued. Every session is to be supervised. Dr. Cole will record behavior in detail. Dr. Carter will document with film. And everything happens inside a reinforced pen designed for safety. If you fail, the decision will be final. Do you understand? I understand, Jesse said. His voice carried neither defiance nor fear, only quiet conviction. I'll do it, however long it takes. Clara exhaled sharply through her nose, but said nothing more. Elias's tone had left no room for argument. The trial had begun. The following week, a new pen was prepared on the south end of the property. The fences stood taller, built with iron reinforcements. A raised platform allowed the veterinarians and hands to observe without stepping into danger. Ranch hands whispered among themselves as they hammered nails and tightened bolts, trading wagers in hushed tones. How long until Jesse ended up on a stretcher? On the morning of the first trial, Storm paced inside the wide enclosure, muscles rippling beneath his dark coat eyes, flashing at every sound. His whinnies split the air, echoing like warning sirens. Jesse walked toward him with nothing more than a rope halter coiled in one hand and a small bundle of fresh alfalfa in the other. No whip, no chains, no weapons. Dr. Cole scribbled in his notes. Dr. Carter adjusted the lens of a camera balanced on a tripod. Miguel leaned on the rail, muttering under his breath, "Crazy bastard." Jesse stepped inside. The gate clicked shut behind him. "Easy, Storm," he said softly. His voice was calm, low, carrying no command, only presence. He moved slowly, boots crunching the dirt. "Today we start over." Storm pawed the ground, ears flicking forward. He tossed his head, nostrils flaring, but he did not charge. For Jesse, that was enough to begin. The first days had one simple goal touch. Jesse didn't try to halter. Storm didn't try to lead him, only to close the distance without sparking fury. At first, Storm swung his head violently, snapping his teeth as Jesse reached out. The stallion's muscles trembled with pent-up force. But Jesse refused to flinch. His hand hovered steady, palm open, waiting. "You don't have to fight me," Jesse whispered each word, carried on a breath. Hour after hour, day after day, the ritual repeated. The stallion tested him, lunged, spun, threatened with bared teeth. But Jesse stood, never lifting a rope, never raising his voice. And then, one afternoon, something shifted. Storm stilled his chest, heaving sweat darkening his flanks. For a fleeting second, he let Jesse's hand brush the coarse mane along his neck. Gasps rose from the railings. Miguel's jaw dropped. "Holy hell," he muttered. It let him touch. Dr. Carter leaned over her notebook, scribbling furiously. Defensive behavior declining. Duration of tolerance increasing. First tangible sign of trust. Jesse stroked the tangled mane once gently, then stepped back, giving Storm the space to process. For the first time, the stallion did not lash out. A week later, Jesse carried something new into the pen, a saddle. Its leather gleamed in the sun, smelling of oil and earth. Storm's ears flattened instantly. He reared, striking the air, screaming his rage. The saddle slipped from Jesse's grip, crashing into the dust. The ranch hands cursed from the sidelines. "He'll never allow it," one shouted. But Jesse didn't scold. He didn't even frown. He picked up the saddle, brushed it off, and set it aside. His hand found Storm's neck, his voice steady as stone. "It's all right. We'll try again tomorrow." And they did. The next day, Storm snorted furiously when the saddle appeared, but Jesse didn't retreat. He laid the leather across the stallion's back for mere seconds before pulling it away. Day after day, the routine repeated. Resistance flared and then ebbed. At last, one golden evening, the saddle rested on Storm's broad back without protest. The stallion's eyes rolled, muscles tense, but he stood. Jesse's hand stroked his neck. "There you go, boy," he whispered. "See, no harm meant." Silence fell over the pen. Even Clara, watching from the edge of the crowd, said nothing. Her lips pressed tight, but her eyes flickered with doubt. Weeks passed. Patience became ritual, ritual became progress. Storm no longer snapped when Jesse reached for his mane. He no longer reared at the sight of the saddle. The bond deepened each day, measured not in leaps, but in fragile, vital steps. Then came the true test. One afternoon, under a pale blue sky, Jesse placed his boot in the stirrup. Storm's muscles coiled like springs, his head jerked, eyes wide with panic. The crowd held its breath. Jesse whispered, his palm flat against Storm's neck. "I'm here. I'm not leaving. Trust me." He swung one leg up slowly, carefully. His weight settled onto the saddle. For a heartbeat, the stallion quivered, every muscle taut with the instinct to explode. But then, he didn't. He stood. The pen fell silent. Even the birds seemed to hush. On the observation platform, Dr. Cole whispered almost reverently, "This is not the monster of Pen 12 anymore." Storm's ears flicked back toward Jesse's voice. The man sat tall, steady, without whip or spur. His hands rested lightly on the reins. He didn't command. He waited. And Storm stayed. The reaction was electric. Ranch hands whooped and cheered. Miguel laughed out loud, clapping the railing so hard the boards rattled. "I'll be damned. I've never seen anything like it. Even Clara." Her arms crossed tight, faltered. Her voice, usually sharp as steel, softened. "Perhaps, just perhaps, he isn't the danger he once was." Elias said nothing for a long time. He simply stared at the image before him, Jesse astride the stallion once feared as a demon now, still as stone, breathing hard but steady. At last, he gave a single nod. In that nod was something no one had seen before: hope. Jesse dismounted slowly, landing lightly on the packed earth. He pressed his forehead to Storm's damp neck, breathing in the musky scent of sweat and leather. His voice was a murmur only the horse could hear. "You did it, Storm. You showed them what I already knew." Storm snorted a deep rumble from his chest, stamping one hoof against the ground. It wasn't rage this time, but something else. An answer, a declaration. The crowd fell quiet again, moved by something deeper than spectacle. They had not just witnessed a man sit a horse. They had seen the birth of trust, fragile but unbreakable, between two beings once dismissed as broken. The day it happened began like any other dry wind rolling off the western ridge, the kind of restless air that whispered of danger. Summer had baked the fields brittle. Every stalk of grass crackled underfoot like old paper, and clouds marched low across the sky with a heavy electric silence. By mid-afternoon, the storm broke, not with rain, but with fury. A jagged bolt of lightning split the horizon, striking down into a thicket of sagebrush on the western flats. For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Then came the hiss of ignition, followed by a roar. Fire. The flames licked the dry grass, greedy, hungry, spreading fast, as the wind fanned them eastward toward the ranch. What began as a small flicker became a wall of flame within minutes. The first to notice was a ranch hand riding back from the ridge. He galloped into the yard, face pale, shouting at the top of his lungs. Fire on the west range, it's moving fast. Within moments, the bell on the ranch tower clanged furiously, sending its alarm across the valley. Men and women dropped their tools, spilling from barns and bunkhouses, racing toward the water pumps, hauling buckets, and dragging long hoses. Elias's voice boomed across the yard. "Get every man to the line. Bring water shovels, whatever you can carry. We stop it before it reaches the horse barns." The wind howled, feeding the inferno. Smoke billowed upward, thick and black, blotting out the sun. The sharp, acrid smell of burning sage rolled through the air, stinging eyes and throats. In minutes, the sky turned a hellish orange. Jesse was already out in the western pasture, trying to pull down fencing so the smaller horses could be driven to safety. The flames had crept closer than anyone realized, carried in sudden leaps by the shifting wind. As he wrestled with a stubborn post, the fire surged with terrifying speed, surrounding him in a half circle. The wind shifted again, slamming a sheet of fire across his path. He froze. Smoke thickened around him, stinging his lungs. The world turned into a gray and red blur. He pulled his shirt over his mouth, coughing hard, eyes watering. He turned one way, then the other blocked. Fire raged in both directions, eating the dry grass faster than his boots could carry him. Shouts echoed faintly through the roar. "Jesse, get out of there." But the voices were distant, muffled, lost in the furnace of sound. Jesse's staggered lungs screaming for air. He dropped to his knees, the ground scorching even through his jeans. Heat pressed against his skin like iron. He coughed until he thought his chest might split open. His vision swam the edges, darkening. From the safety of the line, the ranch hands watched in horror. Through the shifting smoke, they saw the faint outline of a man stumbling, falling, vanishing into the haze. "God help him," Miguel whispered, gripping the fence rail until his knuckles went white. Meanwhile, Storm had been loosed with the other horses as the fire closed in. Gates were thrown wide, and panicked animals thundered toward the open fields. They ran with instinct, the primal urge to survive. Storm bolted at first, his massive frame surging through the chaos muscles, coiling hooves, pounding the earth. Smoke stung his eyes. Firelight danced across his vision. Every nerve screamed at him to flee. But then he heard it. A cough, ragged, human, desperate. His ears snapped forward. He skidded to a halt, nostrils flaring, lungs burning from the smoke. His eyes flicked toward the inferno where Jesse's figure flickered like a shadow. The stallion's body trembled. Every instinct told him to run to live. But something stronger pulled at him. With a piercing scream that cut through the roar of the flames, Storm wheeled around. His hooves struck sparks as he charged back into the smoke. From the ridge, Clara saw him. Her mouth fell open, words stuck in her throat. No, that's impossible. Miguel stared, eyes wide. He's going back. For Jesse. Inside the inferno, Jesse collapsed to one knee, the air searing his lung. His vision narrowed, the world reduced to heat pain and the taste of ash. He coughed violently, barely able to stay upright. Then came the sound, hoofbeats, rapid, relentless pounding closer through the smoke. He forced his head up. Through the shifting curtain of gray, the great black stallion appeared. His coat was streaked with ash, singed in patches, his mane wild, his eyes blazing, not with madness, but with purpose. Storm. Jesse rasped, voice raw. You came back. The horse reared once, a defiant cry against the fire, then dropped his head toward Jesse, nudging him hard, as if to say, "Get up." His hot breath blasted Jesse's face, bringing him back to the moment. Jesse's hands trembled as he reached for the thick mane. He coughed, pulled himself upward, his legs' weak vision blurred. Somehow, with the last reserves of strength, he swung onto Storm's back, clinging to the massive neck like a drowning man to driftwood. "Go," he whispered hoarsely, barely able to draw a breath. "Please, Storm. Take me out." Storm lunged forward, muscles surging like steel cables. The smoke swallowed them whole. Every step was a battle. Sparks rained from above, searing his hide. Ash clung to his coat. His hooves struck earth, already glowing red from the fire's touch. But the stallion did not falter. Jesse buried his face against the mane, coughing, whispering words, half prayer, half command. "I trust you. Take us through. Don't stop." Flames roared like beasts on either side. The path was nothing but smoke and shadow, but Storm pressed on, guided by instinct, by will, by the bond between man and horse. At one point, the inferno blocked the way, completely a wall of fire leaping high into the air. Storm slowed, gathering himself. Jesse felt the great body tense beneath him. "Do it." Jesse whispered, voice breaking. "I believe in you." With a mighty bound, Storm leapt through the curtain of flame hooves, striking the ground beyond with a thunderous crack. Jesse felt the heat lick his legs and the smell of burnt hair rising, but they were through. The stallion didn't stop. He tore onward, bursting through the last veil of smoke. And then suddenly they were in the open, out beyond the fire line, into the shocked silence of the crowd. The sight struck the onlookers like a vision from another world. From the billowing smoke came the stallion, his black coat glowing red in the reflection of the fire muscles, slick with sweat patches of singed hair, smoking faintly. Upon his back clung Jesse, coughing, eyes streaming but alive. Gasps rose, followed by shouts. Miguel whooped, punching the air. He made it. He's alive. The ranch hands surged forward, their faces alight with disbelief and joy. An old rancher, his voice trembling, muttered, "In all my years, I've never seen a horse do that for a man." Tears streaked down his soot-darkened face. Clara stood frozen, hands shaking at her sides. The words caught in her throat, refusing to come. For the first time since Storm had arrived, she did not see a beast, she saw salvation. Jesse slid from Storm's back, collapsing to his knees, hacking and wheezing. Hands reached for him, pulling him away from the smoke, pouring water across his face, pressing cloth to his mouth. Storm stood beside him, sides heaving, nostrils flaring wide as he dragged in ragged breaths. His body bore the marks of the fire-scorched hair, reddened skin, but he did not flee. He planted his hooves firmly in the dirt, eyes fixed on Jesse. The crowd fell into a hush. Even the crackle of the fire seemed distant now. Elias stepped forward slowly. His face, lined with years of leadership and hard judgment, softened as he approached. He reached out a weathered hand, laying it against Storm's soot-streaked neck. His voice came low, thick with emotion. "You're no monster. You're the savior of this ranch, of all of us." Storm stood tall beneath his touch ears, flicking back then forward as if he understood. Around them, the community bowed their heads in silence. All the doubts, the debates, the accusations, they crumbled like ash in the wind. What stood before them was no longer the terror of Pen 12, no longer the cursed stallion whispered about in taverns. Storm was a hero. 6 months had passed since the prairie fire, and Wyoming was alive again. The blackened scars of the blaze had softened under spring rains, replaced now by a quilt of green grasses stretching across the open plains. The land had healed, and so had the people who lived upon it. Most afternoons, the same sight greeted the valley: Jesse riding atop Storm, moving at an easy lope through fields that shimmered under the summer sun. What once had been the most feared animal in the county now carried himself like a king, his mane flowing, his dark coat gleaming despite the faint scars left from the fire. Wherever they went, people paused. Ranch hands who had once mocked Jesse now lifted their hats in quiet respect. Mothers gathering laundry waved as the pair rode by, while children ran along the fences, shouting Storm's name, with the kind of awe usually reserved for outlaws turned folk heroes. "Storm, Storm," the children cried, as though calling to a figure from legend. Jesse never failed to notice how the eyes of the townsfolk had changed. In the beginning, those eyes had been narrowed with suspicion, then widened with disbelief, then clouded with doubt. Now when people looked at Storm and at Jesse astride him, there was no trace of fear, only admiration. The transformation had been more than rumor. It had become history. One morning, the local paper printed a headline across the front page: "From Pen 12 to Hero, the Redemption of Storm." The story chronicled every detail: the stallion's violent past, the endless debates the day the flames turned him from outcast to savior. In the saloon above the polished oak bar hung a newly commissioned painting. It showed Storm bursting from a wall of fire, Jesse clinging to his back, smoke swirling behind them like the gates of hell itself. Men who once cursed Storm now raised their glasses to the image, shaking their heads in wonder. Elias himself spoke openly of his change of heart. One evening at supper, he confessed to the ranch hands, "Back then, I prayed only that Storm wouldn't kill anyone before we sent him off. I was wrong, dead wrong. That horse saved not just Jesse, but this whole ranch." His voice cracked as he lifted his glass. To Storm, even Clara, who had been Storm's fiercest critic, was no longer unmoved. She was often seen at the barn with a handful of carrots, her once stern voice soft as she spoke to the stallion. "You gave me reason to eat my words," she admitted one afternoon, stroking his muzzle. "And I'm glad for it." Storm was no longer a monster whispered about at night. He had become something far greater, a comrade in arms, a companion equal to the cowboys who tamed the West with grit and steel. His place was no longer in the shadows of fear, but in the light of respect. The fire had not only rewritten Storm's story, it had reshaped the ranch itself. Inspired by the miracle of the stallion's redemption, Elias decided to act on an idea long in his heart. With the help of Dr. Emily Carter and Dr. Nathan Cole, he broke ground on a new section of the property. It was a place with strong fencing, wide corrals, and patient caretakers. A place not for the strong and steady, but for the broken and discarded. They called it the Second Chance Barn. A wooden sign hung above its gate, carved by Miguel's own hand, where beasts find their souls again. Miguel, brimming with pride, took it upon himself to tell every visitor the tale of Storm. That horse was once worse than any of these, he'd say, guiding guests along the aisles. But look at him now. If Storm can be saved, any of them can. And so the barn began to fill. Horses marked for slaughter, labeled too dangerous, too stubborn, too wild, were instead sent here. One by one, they were given a chance to start again. Some healed quickly, others slowly, but every small victory echoed the lesson Storm had carved into the hearts of the valley. No soul is beyond redemption. Jesse and Storm stood at the center of it, all the living proof that patience and faith could rewrite destiny. Together, they trained, taught, and inspired. Storm was no longer just Jesse's horse. He was the symbol of the entire movement, a flag that fluttered against the winds of despair. Yet for Jesse, the greatest moments were not those of fame or ceremony, but the quiet ones. One evening, after a long day's work at the barn, Jesse led Storm out to the open pasture. The sun was setting, painting the sky in ribbons of gold and crimson. He slipped the saddle from Storm's back, letting it fall softly to the grass. The stallion shook his mane, snorted, and turned his head toward Jesse with calm eyes that seemed to hold a world of understanding. Jesse rested his hand against the warm hide, speaking in a low voice. "Do you remember the day I named you? You were still fire and flesh back then. But the moment you had a name, you weren't just a beast anymore. You were Storm." And from that moment, everything changed. Storm lowered his massive head, pressing it gently against Jesse's shoulder. The gesture was simple, wordless, yet filled with meaning. Jesse closed his eyes and let a smile break across his tired face. For the first time in years, he felt whole. Storm hadn't just been saved, Jesse himself had been redeemed. The horse had dragged him out of more than fire. He had pulled him free of poverty, mockery, and despair. As the prairie stretched quiet around them, Cowboy and Stallion stood together, not as man and beast, but as companions bound by something deeper than words. The bond became legend when Elias invited Jesse to speak at a town gathering months later. The hall was packed, the air filled with anticipation. Folks from all corners of the county came eager to hear from the man who had ridden a monster into history. Jesse stood at the front, his hat in his hands. He was never much for speeches, but the sight of Storm's portrait hanging behind the podium steadied him. "I want to tell you something simple." Jesse began his voice, carrying through the silent hall. "When I first brought Storm here, people said he was nothing but trouble. Dangerous, useless. They called him a monster." He paused, letting the words settle. "But I gave him a name. And when you name a soul, you admit it has value. That's the first step in turning a beast into a companion." The hall grew so still that the crackle of the lanterns could be heard. Heads bowed slightly, eyes shone with something more than respect understanding. From the front row, a boy tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad," the boy whispered, "was Storm really a monster once?" The father bent low, shaking his head gently. "No, son. He was just a soul no one had ever believed in." The words rippled through the crowd, whispered from ear to ear. They carried beyond the hall, out into the dusty streets, into the barns and fields of the valley. In the months that followed, the saying became a kind of creed. Every soul deserves a name. Ranchers repeated it when they brought new horses to the Second Chance barn. Mothers told it to their children as bedtime lessons. Travelers carried it to towns far beyond Dust Valley, spreading the tale of Storm the Redeemed. For the valley folk, Storm was no longer merely a horse. He was a legend living among them, a reminder carved in flesh and spirit that patience could tame fury, that trust could rewrite fate, and that even the wildest storm could become a beacon of hope. And so Jesse and Storm rode on side by side, not into myth, but into life, cowboy and stallion, man and legend, forever inseparable on the wide, endless prairies of Wyoming.